Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
Carol CRENSHAW is a meditation teacher of the Himalayan tradition, and she's going to be talking about yogic view of spirituality. Welcome.
Thank you, Mansi.
Carol CRENSHAW, MS, Eastern Studies, Comparative Psychology, Holistic Health, EDM. Carol is a consulting hypnotist, certified hypnosis instructor, and certified practitioner in NLP and EFT. She's the co-author of EFT for Meditation and a contributing author to Clinical EFT Handbook. Carol is a meditation teacher in the Himalayan tradition, trained directly by Swami Rama of the Himalayas and Mahamandaleshwar Swami Vedabharati. She is an initiator in the meditative tradition of the Himalayan sages, a member of the Association of the Himalayan Yoga Meditation Societies International, and a certified yoga therapist. Carol is the co-founder of Tools for Joyful Living, LLC, and the co-founder of the nonprofit Inner Peace Yoga Center in Indianapolis, Indiana. Welcome, 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 Carol. Stage is all yours.
Great to be here. Okay, well, my talk is a very nice continuation of Prakashji's, focusing on classical aspects of yoga. And when I first started teaching yoga many years ago, it was 1983, I saw that yoga was basically focused on the physical body. And I thought that this was a trend just in the United States. As the years passed, I saw more and more yoga studios coming into being, which mainly taught work on the physical body and a little breath work. But I came to see over time, knowing people around the world, that this is basically a worldwide trend. Those of us who are here probably have a much deeper understanding. But for the average person, yoga means body work and maybe a little breath work, maybe stress management. But yoga is a very complete system for knowing ourselves at every level of our being. Understanding our body, how it works and what its function is and how we could use it for creating a foundation for achieving higher states of consciousness, understanding the senses, the breath, the mind, and ultimately going even beyond the mind and realizing our center of consciousness, which is there all the time, is just covered up by lots of static and dust, so we don't perceive it very easily. So yoga is the process of clearing out this static and this dust at all levels of our being and understanding who we are, pure consciousness. All the other levels of being, everything that manifests in the world, comes from this pure consciousness and flows on various degrees and grades of consciousness. So as we go inward, we get to subtler realms of our being until we realize our true nature. As we do this, most of us are still living in the world. So a beautiful symbol in yoga is the lotus. And lotus is a lovely flower that grows in murky, muddy waters. So lotus symbolizes living in the world, but remaining above. So we don't need to go off into a cave and exclude ourselves from the world. It's really not the right path for most of us. But we need to learn how to live skillfully in the world. And as my master teacher used to say, become a citizen of both worlds, our inner world, our inner world and our outer world. So to do that, we need to learn how to live in the world, do our actions, but not be more and more bound by actions, desires, expectations. So we do this by focusing on serving others and doing it skillfully, selflessly, and lovingly. And the more we do that, the more we free ourselves from the bondage of expectations and desires. In yoga, there are two key words that could help us: abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa means practice. So practice has two aspects: formally sitting and doing yoga practices, our asana, our pranayama, our relaxations, but especially our meditation practice, spiritual practice that keeps us constantly tuned in to the core of our being and allows us to experience subtler and subtler realms, not just read about them, talk about them, but experience them directly, which is the whole heart of yoga, direct experience. The other aspect of abhyasa or practice is to actually engage that awareness, whatever we're doing during the day. And we do that through breath awareness. We do that through mantra. We do that through tools that allow us to function in the world, but still remain aware of that center within. Then the other part of this twofold pair is vairagya. Vairagya means non-attachment, and often that gets misinterpreted. So non-attachment doesn't mean I'm going to leave the world and I'm going to have no emotions and not respond to anything. We could be very, very involved in the world and be not attached because we're not drawn by desires, attractions, or aversions, and we're not drawn by the desire to have many, many things, which ultimately clouds our mind even more. So as time goes on, we simplify our minds, we simplify our lifestyle, we think twice about what we're doing, so our energy gets used for that which it aids our self-realization. So those are like two wings, in a sense, that go together. Also, it's good to remember that being born in a human form is a great blessing in itself, because the human species is the only species that has the opportunity for self-realization. So as Prakashji was saying, yoga is not something you do once. We need to do it regularly. We need to practice every day to really clear ourselves of all the static I was talking about and go to a deeper state within. Now, I'd like to share something with you. And this is just a little diagram that can help you understand these 8 different rungs that are talked about in classical yoga, which is called Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 rung path or 8 limb path. It's also
Carol,
called Raja Yoga, the
Carol,
royal path.
we don't see the diagram. We see the write up. Were you planning to show the
Yes,
diagram?
it's right up. Yes, it's a little outline.
Oh, okay,
Do you,
okay, thank
do you
you.
see the 1 through 8 yamas through
Yes, yes,
samadhi?
yes. Yes,
Okay.
yes, Carol. I just wanted to be sure.
Yes, thank you. So I thought I'd put this up so you could see it, especially if you don't know any of these Sanskrit words, and I limited them just to the 8 rungs so people who are not familiar would be able to follow more easily. But this is one path that's talked about in the Yoga Sutras, and it's the main path that's good for most of us. Uh, there are 2 other paths talked about in the Yoga Sutras. There are 4 padas or chapters in Yoga Sutras, one of the most renowned texts of yoga. In the first pada or chapter, there's the path of vairagya and abhyasa, which I mentioned. And that's the path for more advanced students. You don't necessarily need to do asana, body work, breathing, because they have that down already. And then at the beginning of the second pada or chapter, there's a path called Kriya Yoga. And this is just made up of three rungs. One is called tapas, which in this sense means any spiritual practices and individual needs to progress spiritually. And then there's self-study, which is remembrance of mantra, prayer, breath awareness, study of scripture, and devotion to God, the bhakti or devotional aspect of yoga. But this path called Ashtanga Yoga is especially suited for Westerners. It's especially suited for modern times. It's especially suited for people who want proof or want a scientific perspective. And it's good for us who have grown up in a society where spirituality was not focused on at all, like the United States. And then when we're introduced to these concepts, they might be very foreign. So here we have the opportunity to go step by step and understand how we could go inward to a state of spiritual awareness. The first two rungs are called the yamas and the niyamas. They're sometimes called the 10 commitments of yoga. And the yamas are restraints, things to avoid doing. Niyamas are observances, things to actively do. The more we practice the yamas and niyamas, the more we're at peace with ourselves, the more we develop harmony in our relationships and purity within ourselves. So we're more in a state to do the subtler practices of yoga without this disturbance, without the voice of our conscience coming in and saying, oh, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. So just very briefly to go over these, the first restraint is nonviolence, ahimsa. And this is the supreme principle or foundational practice. Non-killing, non-lying, non-harming, non-injuring. All of these apply at the level of thought, action, speech. So we could do a physically violent act towards someone and it would be a very obvious violation. But what if we're thinking a violent thought about someone or wishing them ill? The same also applies. So this always trumps over the others. It's the most important. Non-lying, sometimes it's translated truthfulness, but truth at our level is very relative and it's different for everyone. So I prefer to think of it as non-lying, avoiding telling lies to ourselves and to others. Now, sometimes that could get us into tricky situations because remember that nonviolence is more important. So we don't want to tell a lie, but here's an example. Friends of ours just redecorated their house and they're very excited and they love it. They invite us over to see their house and we really don't like how they decorated it. And they ask us, well, how do you like it? Well, if you say, I think it's horrible, then you would be telling a lie, but you would be practicing nonviolence. And if you say, oh, it's beautiful, I mean, if you said it was horrible, you wouldn't be telling a lie, but you'd be practicing violence. But if you say it's beautiful, you'd be telling a lie, and that wouldn't be good either. So somehow you have to think of a wording that accommodates both, like, oh, I think these surroundings really suit you very well. I'm glad you're happy with it. Something like that. Non-stealing. It could be something like going into a store and stealing someone's ideas, presenting them as your own. Plagiarism. And then this continence or non-overindulgence of the senses. So on a narrow level, this refers to sexual continence. For a monk or a swami, avoiding sex. In physical physical act and in the mind, which is very hard practice. For the householder, the person who's living in the world, it means having one partner. But on a broader level, it means controlling the way we use our energy. So we don't let too much energy go out through the senses, but we also don't repress our urges either. It's a balancing act. And then non-possessiveness, which means living simply and living so that we have this philosophy that the things of the world are here for us to use but not to own. Niyamas are next, or observances: purity of body and mind, contentment, the acceptance of where we are and our situation. We may not like it, but we accept it. But it doesn't mean we're satisfied with it. So there's a saying in yoga, be content, but never satisfied. So we have goals and we have things we want to accomplish, but we're content at where we are at this moment. Austerity, also, the word is tapas in Sanskrit, which means that which creates inner radiance. So using our senses wisely, that we don't overexpress or repress, like I was saying, so we could live in the world, but still have the energy to do the inner work. Self-study, remembrance of mantra, prayer, study of scripture. So our mind keeps staying focused on our inner goal and our inner being. Surrender to God so that what we do, we're doing as a service to a higher being for a higher purpose. Asana, third rung, which is the whole focus in yoga, unfortunately, in most places, but it's still important. Cultural asanas are the postures we do in a yoga class, and the meditative asana is the position we use to meditate. We do the cultural asanas so that when we meditate, we can be totally still and forget the body, not be disturbed by pain, itches, twitches, etc. Pranayama actually means control the vital force. And as we do breathing practices, it helps us gain this control. When with energy is very balanced through the breath, mind naturally turns inward, and that's rung 5, pratyahara, or sense withdrawal. These 5 make what's called the outer limb of yoga. The last 3 make a continuum called samaya. Dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, samadhi, spiritual absorption, or deeper states of meditation. We start by learning how to concentrate the mind, which if you've watched it, you know just goes all over the place. When we could concentrate for a longer period of time, we've achieved a state of meditation where the mind is quieter and more inward. And when that meditation is prolonged, we go to a state called samadhi. And there's many levels of samadhi, but it's loosely grouped into this rung. So that's a little overview. If you're interested in learning more about these 8 rungs, I suggest the book, The Royal Path by Swami Rama. And I'd like to just end with a brief quote by the same person, my master teacher. The best of knowledge comes through revelations, not through the mind. It is a flood of knowledge that overwhelms the whole being. When you can calm the mind, then that knowledge will come to you. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you. Thank you for channeling the wisdom of Himalayan masters, especially your guru, and making it very accessible to today's people, like this current age, and especially to Western audiences. Deep pranam. On behalf of the World United, I would like to present you a certificate of appreciation to Carol Crenshaw for being an esteemed presenter in the third edition of the World Parliament on Spirituality 2020 North America. I present this on behalf of Dr. Yugandhar GR and Grandma Paresha. Thank you so much, Carol.